Um, good evening, everyone. Hello and welcome. It is evening, but it's been a balmy, hot day here in London, and I'm really delighted that you're able to join us today for a project called Hope in the Heat, which invited 6 emerging creatives from the Somerset House Futures Producer program to collaborate with us, design art studio Superflux, to imagine hopeful futures for the hotter world of tomorrow. This project was kindly supported by the National Lottery's Emerging Futures Fund program. And we're delighted to have Cassie Robinson, who initiated the program, here with us to share her thoughts on it. Cassie leads on innovation, policy, and practice at the National Lottery Community Fund, but wears many different hats with a background, and actually with a background in design. And I think she's the only art school graduate who I know who works in the funding world, and it's really exciting because she's able to bring all the ideas around creative practice into her funding work. So thanks so much, Cassie, for joining us, and over to you.
Thanks, Anab, and yeah, it's really lovely to be here, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from the future producers and seeing the work. So the Emerging Futures Fund was initiated last summer, right in the first wave of the pandemic, and because the National Lottery Community Fund is such a large funder, we have many different funding programs, and we were of course doing a huge amount of crisis response funding, but it felt so important to also make some space for a different type of funding, which is where the Emerging Futures Fund came from. And that was in part because, you know, it's been called a time for, you know, to go through the portal, or there were cracks appearing, or there's many different metaphors for, I guess, what the time represented. But as those cracks appeared, or the portal appeared, I was particularly interested in, you know, who's going to shape what comes through those cracks. So whose voices, whose ideas are going to be present and grow louder during this time. And one of the reasons for creating the fund was wanting to ensure that different voices were represented and had that resource. And I guess it wasn't just whose voices, whose ideas, it was also what type of ideas we need at this time. You know, given the scale of challenges that we face, we need new thinking, different perspectives, deeper thinking, longer term thinking, all kinds of new ideas that really can shake up the status quo. And for me, again, this funding program was trying to resource and create space for that kind of thinking. So it was really nice to be able to launch the fund, and to launch it as a set of inquiries. So we were looking for the funding to not be projects with outcomes and measures and evidence, but actually open questions with resource. And 52 different communities across the UK have been taking part in the Emerging Futures Fund. And I guess I'm just really hoping that some of the ideas and some of the seeds that have been sown through this programme, this particular program that we're here to talk about tonight, but many of the seeds that were sown across the UK can actually flourish now and actually become a reality, and really shape these plural and preferred futures that we need at this time. So yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for being part of the fund, because I think we're so lucky to have this kind of creative talent involved in thinking about the future.
Thanks, Cassie. Thank you. Just want to say a little bit about us in Superflux. We were overseeing the project, working with the future producers. So yeah, Superflux, we're an art and design studio. I think that title changes from day to day, but we imagine plural futures at the intersection of the climate crisis, technology, and more than human futures. And we are kind of, myself, John Ardern, and Anab, Jain, we initiated the studio some 12 years ago. And I think our work we would categorize our work as building future worlds that explore new ways of seeing and acting. And the hope is that that by doing that, we give agency to people, we give new ways for people to think and engage with the future. Yeah, that's from us. And maybe I could ask the future producers if they can just give a quick, just say their name and a high level introduction to their kind of interests and where they're coming from. So maybe we could start with Charisse.
Hello, I'm Charisse Lucina. I'm on the Future Producers program. My work kind of consists in community work and developing experiences and events that make people's sense of spirituality more relatable and accessible, and kind of getting at that through a few different ways. So that's kind of at the core of everything, ultimately, is to try and bring a bit more awareness to different experiences. But because I say it's everything, I support spirituality being accessed in front of a 6-foot speaker sound system, or even in the park under a tree meditating or something, and trying to find different ways to get at people's experiences and then bring them into a context that everybody can kind of relate to. It's what I do.
Excellent. Thanks, Charisse. Thank you. And Jessie, maybe you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Jessie, and I'm a designer / creative technologist. I'm really interested in questioning how we relate to the world and the entities that we share it with, especially in terms of the nature-culture dichotomy. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Thanks. And Zara?
Hi, I'm Zahra. So I work with, writing, visual arts, media, photography, and a lot of my work kind of focuses on nature and kind of community connection and kind of creating spaces where they can feel kind of accessible and everyday to kind of everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, Charisse, Jessie, Zara. Thanks for joining us. I just wanted to give a little overview of the process of our collaboration over the last few months. So initially, when we were imagining this project and conceiving it, something that Oliver Morton wrote in his book, Planet Remade, really struck with us. The idea that the way a society imagines its future matters, and who gets to do the imagining matters. And I think we really wanted to surface through this project and others multiple different voices of young people from different backgrounds who have a varied kind of diverse and plural ideas about what our futures could be. And so we started working with 6 of you. We had 6 to I think maybe even 8 mentored sessions and discussions, and it was so enriching to see the different perspectives and visions all of you brought to the projects. You know, we had everything from intergalactic intimacy and space travel envisioned through the Black queer gaze that Okucha was working on, to plant-generated poetry from Jessie, and post-colonial herbology from Charisse. This became such an incredible opportunity for us to really be given this time and space to work with the young producers. We have, as a studio, often worked with young people. Very recently, we had 3 activists who were involved as advocates on a project. But really, it's the insights, the kind of multiple perspectives that I think truly begin to inform our work when we continue in this kind of collaborative engagement. And what was exciting about Hope in the Heat is that it's really not about our work at Superflux or about us at all. Instead it was us engaging in a really open and nourishing conversation. And for young people who've been through so much in the recent years with, seeing the university fees coming, experiencing climate change firsthand, and being left in a limbo during the COVID pandemic, there was so much we felt we could learn from you. So initially, this project was planned as a series of workshops. In this kind of really, we had, worked out methods, and we had worked out these exercises. And, after the first 3-hour workshop where each of the future producers presented their hopes and fears for the future, it became evident that this was such a rich dialogue that we really wanted to continue it in this way. And so we steered away from a rather formal methodological approach and let the conversations guide the process. In total, there were 8 sessions. First, the young producers presented their ideas through interactive Miro boards where everybody could comment and share and feedback each other, which was really generative. It was it was really exciting to see the generative process. And then afterwards, when their ideas were starting to become more kind of tangible in a way and not so abstract, the conversations and the direction of mentoring was about how do you take something that feels abstract but translate it into something that's tangible and realizable by yourselves within the time you have, but also something that can be shared with your communities and networks. And so it became then a process where we took on a mentor role and sharing our own experience in world building and storytelling to help them guide their projects. So this is just kind of an overview of our really rich and inspiring process. I think in this project, I have to say, really, for us, it's really been the process that has been really at the heart of it, because your projects are, you've just started off, and we really hope that they will go and continue to develop and grow. So I wanted to kind of hand it over to you, if you can spend 5-6 minutes sharing your projects. We'll start with Cherise. Thank you.
Thank you. I prepared a little PowerPoint for my project, which I will share with you guys now. Here we go. So it started with a seed, an idea that was put to us and nurtured with energy to grow. Like the seasons, the vision of the idea took many forms, but the core message stayed the same. Ultimately, I wanted to create an experience that got people to return to nature, be it physically, emotionally, medicinally, or spiritually, and to see that nature has more to share with us than oxygen, but stores wisdom and knowledge discovered by our ancestors, animals, and insects alike, that help us to be better residents in this Garden of Eden, in my opinion. My work outside of the project was very much in alignment with the project. I was working with a group called the Mobile Apothecary, who have a nature reserve in Bethnal Green, which includes a medicine garden for bats, medicine garden and a bat and bird sanctuary, and areas for single and group activities like meditation or workshops and loads of other stuff. And I walked around this mini forest garden and realized there were treasures all around me, because almost every plant or tree had the ability to improve the human condition, be it physically or spiritually. And there were many facilitators and cultures that still work with this knowledge, though I do feel like the Western society has sort of lost touch of it. So that was my driving force to bring it back. So whilst my initial idea was to bring the treasure to people, I later decided to take the people to the treasure instead, as John and Anab had reminded me of the core message, which was ultimately to return to nature and not just to discover its riches, but to connect with it holistically and submerge in its surroundings and remember what we once knew. This decision began my journey to planting trees. This is a photo of me at the nature reserve with a bunch of saplings, the ones that I personally selected because I felt a connection with them. And they were given away, loads of them were given away by the Woodland Trust, which they do quite regularly as well. And I was allowed to take some and plant them around London. However, this was during early spring this year, so many of the saplings hadn't actually woken up yet, which made identifying them a very interesting and fun challenge, but nonetheless a challenge. And from that moment, I was learning about the differences in anatomy of plants and how they blossom and when and how best to plant them and what creatures aid their growth, like worms. So now I'd like to share the video of me planting a tree, because that is always fun. And this is I did with my pal, Duncan. He helped me go and plant these trees, and it's a very funny little video of us. It was a really fun day as well. One of those plants that was growing with the tree already also, I think, should help it grow. They work together. And this tree in particular is the cherry tree. You kind of get a little hint of where it is in the forest that it's planted in. But it's growing happily and healthily. So yeah, it would be great when you guys get a chance to go out there and visit the little saplings. Something that I like to encourage people to do with the saplings is to water them, because it's hot. And yeah, sing a little song maybe, just say hello, they like to be communicated with. And it's sort of as a process of libations and recognition of our ancestors. Thank you. That's enough of the video. So after that, I then had to write about all the trees and learn about all the trees, which I then uploaded onto my website, the Create Conscious Community, which is a community I founded. And essentially, yeah, you go and you answer riddles about the trees, and you get their location. So this one's a little sneak peek, I suppose. Don't tell anybody, I'm joking. So yeah, you get to see the trees, you get to find out about what they look like, how to care for them, their medicinal, spiritual, historical, some sustainable treatment of them. This tree actually was stolen, but I really hope it's planted in a new place that's loving and caring. But this tree are the part of the surrounding siblings. So I also wrote about the trees that were next to the trees that I planted, so that you could find out about what's around them and how they can be sort of beneficial or spiritual or whatever it is that you're sort of looking for while you're out there, if you're looking for anything. But do look for the saplings. That is a great treasure. That's my last slide. I just wanted to end on there we go. I learned that ideas start with seeds, and they grow when they are nurtured, and as majestic as trees, and leave legacies in the future that I hope to see. And yeah, I wanted people to sort of go out and visit the trees, and here are some pictures of the trees that I planted and people watering them and singing prayers and poetry to them, just to remind us that we can communicate with them, and they connect us to our roots, but as they grow, they help us look to the sky. We took this idea knowing that we wouldn't bask in their shade for 30 years or so, but we look forward to that moment. And knowing this tree will outlive me is an incredible gift and honor to share in its journey. And yeah, I will update the website as the trees grow as well, and the plants that grow around them. And yeah, so go and check them out. Get in some nature. Thank you.
Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks, Cherise. This feels like such a beautiful start of a bigger journey. I kind of feel you're already out in the community, working with collaborators. You're already spreading the idea of what was the Emerging Futures Fund's goal, actually. Thank you. There are questions we have for you, but we'll go through everyone and then come back. So to move on, Jessie, would you be happy to share your project with us?
Yeah, for sure. So the project I've been working on is called Poet, and sorry, you let me know when you can see my slides.
We can.
Yeah.
Perfect. So Poet is a consideration of a society built on alternative power structures and the artifacts that exist within it. So it's an imagined consumer product of this future where nature and technology coexist harmoniously and without hierarchy. And it allows users to communicate with a plant through poetry. In this future, plants are cohabitants rather than objects that are owned. And if the plant is happy, if it's been cared for and interacted with, then it will respond to touch by generating a poem. The primary means by which we communicate is through spoken and written language, but throughout most of history, this has been unique to humans. With the technologies of today, we are able to give voice to things previously unheard. Poet uses machine-generated language in the form of poetry to give dark ecology a voice to be heard and communicated with. Throughout history and across cultures, poets have been inspired by and written about nature. So by presenting nature through a poet's voice, poet aims to return the sense of wonder and admiration to an urban audience that no longer pays the same attention to the non-human natural world. So the mood of the plant affects the quality of the poem that is generated. The happier the plant, the more diverse and less deterministic the results. It's determined by several data points. So the soil moisture levels, the luminosity, temperature, and humidity of its environment, and the amount of human interaction that it's received. And these are then visualized through color, composition, and typography. The more the plant's been interacted with, the more coherent the text, tending towards a soft wave that weaves down the pages, and less recent interaction means that the positioning becomes more random. The typeface itself is variable, with the letter forms reacting to the soil moisture levels, and so the closer to optimum levels, the letter forms become increasingly unrestrained, free, and poetic. And the colors of the background are generated according to the luminosity, temperature, and humidity of its environment, so becoming more vibrant when the plant is happier. So by encouraging more interaction with nature, nature is, as discussed in Dark Ecology, being not just pristine wilderness, Poet aims to create a positive feedback loop where both human and plant benefit to bring people, nature, and technology closer together. The studies show that interacting with plants improves our physiological and psychological well-being in myriad ways. For example, people experience an unconscious calming reaction to touching a plant. And interestingly, plants can also feel touch. Research in the field isn't conclusive, but findings from several studies indicate that plants respond positively to touch, growing stronger and becoming more resistant to pests and disease. And touch is also incredibly important in how we interact with the world. It forms a key role in personal development and the development of social relationships. So Ashley Montague notes that touch is 10 times stronger than verbal or emotional contact, and it affects damn near everything that we do. No other sense can arouse you like touch. We forget that touch is not only basic to our species, but the key to it. This rethinking of hierarchies and relationships between humans and non-humans is grounded in ideas central to animism and actor network theory. So for the Ojibwe people, for example, personhood is not limited to humans. Just as there are human persons, there are also rock persons and bear persons. And in actor network theory, a central concept is that there are no hierarchies between actors in a network. Instead, the network is defined by the relationships between its actors, both human and non-human. Evidently, the relationship that currently exists in the Western world between non-human nature and human society is not predetermined or immutable. Through projects like Poets, I'm interested in questioning established norms such as these in order to reveal alternate and potentially better ways of being. So yeah, that's my project.
Wow. Wonderful. Thanks so much, Jessie. Would love to hear some excerpts of poems if you have them with you afterwards in the Q&A maybe. It's really interesting because I remember some of the ones that were emerging were unbelievably moving, and it was quite hard to imagine whether it was just a coincidence or whether there was really this kind of sense of touch, and especially when you talk about touch, something that in the last year and a half has been missed more than anything else. I think this is really poignant project. Thank you, and I hope you continue to work on this in different ways. So we'll move on to Zara. Zara, would you like to share your project?
Yeah, sure. Just share this.
Thanks.
Okay. Hopefully you can see my slides.
Yeah.
So my project was an archive of rice, and I guess the project in itself aims to almost celebrate, preserve, but also kind of draw attention to rice, the future of rice, but also kind of more wider, the future of food in a climate-altered landscape. And I guess kind of starting off of where that project came from and why kind of rice and why food, I was looking at kind of climate change and how it affects us in our daily lives and how it will affect us, kind of imagining what that future will look like as we as the kind of climate starts to develop even more. And I guess food just is such a kind of big part of our everyday lives, and it's such a big connection, almost an unconscious connection to nature that we have every day. So that was my kind of starting point. I kept coming back to food as like, how will that change around everything else changing around it? And food is something that is so affected by the climate. And I was also, I guess, thinking about that disconnect that we have with food right now today as well, where food is so accessible, food is so kind of available to us and easy to get at any time of the year. So it's almost hard to think the kind of effects that are happening behind the scenes in that kind of process and the foods that are being affected by climate change. So kind of looking at those ideas and exploring more, I was looking at kind of what foods are extinct, are threatened to be extinct, and kind of what that future of food looks like. And kind of some common foods that kept coming up, things like coffee, avocados, peanuts kept coming up in a lot of the research I was doing. But then I came across rice, and I got quite hooked onto that because it's something that connected with me myself. Like I like rice is such a big part of kind of the food I eat and have grown up eating. And I know it is for so many people around me and also around the world, and it's enjoyed by so many people in different ways and different kind of cultures and different types of rice. There's so much variety and depth in kind of rice just as a food. So I started thinking about that kind of what that future would look like if rice is threatened and rice has a potential of not being there in the future. What could that look like? Because it feels almost so far away because it's such a big part of so many lives and so much kind of community experience around the world. And as I was reading more about it, these are some kind of stills from what I was doing. I was creating some, trying to kind of capture the issues facing rice visually, and thinking about how to kind of bring these ideas of the future of rice, but also kind of thinking about that backstory of rice that we don't often see when we go and pick up rice from the supermarket. We don't see the kind of energy, the resource that goes into it, from seed to end up on our plates. And as I started researching rice even more, it got even more interesting because rice is both threatened by climate change in that it relies on a lot of water and consistent heat to grow. So where that's kind of changing and like resources are depleting and heat, extreme weathers are affecting the areas that it is traditionally grown, it affects the yields of the rice. So there's not as much rice being produced in these areas where it's traditionally grown. But alongside that, rice needs a lot of water to be able to grow and to be able to kind of become the plant that it is. And that water in itself, just the way these flooded systems work, they kind of contribute a lot to greenhouse gases. So in some ways, it also kind of has a big contribution to climate change. So I thought it was a really nice kind of example of food that's both kind of contributing to this issue that's also kind of threatening its future, and also so many people connect to it in so many different ways. So it was, it became the focus of this project just because it felt so big and layered into that kind of, into those ideas that I was looking at. So it came together as a video alongside an audio piece, alongside a kind of community space that we've tried to kind of cultivate and open up, which I'll kind of go into a bit later, but we can watch the video now. So just some highlights from the actual full video. I'll play now. So that was just some highlights from what was an actual kind of a much longer video that explored kind of these ideas around rice and the different elements of that kind of trying to capture and almost preserve the variety of rice and the way rice is enjoyed, but also I wanted to bring those elements of heat and water into it. So water kind of coming to a boil as always kind of looking at that process that goes into growing rice, but also those things that are affecting its future. So on the website as well and on the online page where the video lives, there's also a short kind of audio piece which was an interview, or which was taken from an interview that I had with Dr. Adam H. Price, who's a rice geneticist and professor at the University of Glasgow. And he, alongside many other scientists, are doing work on kind of the sustainable future of rice and developing kind of sustainable ways that we can continue growing rice in the places they're traditionally grown. So that was really interesting to listen to as well, and just to kind of have that insight into kind of what that future of rice does look like for both us and the people who kind of grow it. And I think the biggest kind of outtake or takeaway from that conversation that we had was just the impacts and the extent of impact that the threat of rice has on I guess the communities that grow it more than the people who are enjoying it. So one of the topics we discussed was this conversation on, I guess, how whether a future exists where rice won't be there, and I guess generally his thoughts were that the rice will have a chance of surviving as it can be grown in other places, because as climate change develops and happens, other places will be able to grow rice, but it will be these places that traditionally their lifestyles and livelihoods are shaped around the production of rice. They will be the ones that are most impacted. So then the final kind of part of the project, I guess the third element, was this kind of capturing of recipes, and really kind of opening up a space for people to share recipes of their own, and kind of their own family recipes, rice recipes that they just enjoy or know of, or kind of from their community or culture, or just really kind of drawing attention to that variety of rice and just rice as we know it today. Because if rice is changing, if rice is being developed, or it's threatened, its future is threatened, what does that mean for us? And is there a way to kind of capture what it is to us today and what that means to us today? So part of that project as well on the website is one of my own kind of family recipes, which I got from my mum, of khichdi, and there's also a space that opens up comments for people to also contribute their own recipes as well, to kind of build this archive, I guess, because I guess the video and the audio is a start in drawing kind of attention to it and kind of capturing some of it, but I guess this kind of community interactive aspect is the kind of bigger picture of what it could be, and just kind of collecting all these recipes. The recipes can be so different for different people. You know, the same recipe could be done completely different for someone else, and the way they've known it. So yeah, I think that was the final part of the project.
Beautiful. Thank you, Zara. It's such an important topic through the lens of rice, not only looking at climate change, but also connecting people and communities across the world. It's also such a beautifully made video and always makes me hungry. Thank you. We'll come back to you with questions. I wanted to start off with a question for Cherise. Cherise, we started off by collecting your hopes and fears and aspirations for the future. And one of the things it said was, I hope to see a return to nature, a place where people can playing in the wild can name trees just by looking at their leaves. And I think you've kind of been on that journey, and you're still on that journey. And along the way, you work with a lot of different kinds of actors who are in this space. And I wanted to understand where you feel you're at right now, with what sense of agency do you feel over the course of the project, and something that you can take forward to kind of, seed communities, as you say, with this hope, given the challenges we face. Just want to get a sense of your feelings for that.
Well, yeah, I guess the project, I've taken on some responsibility over the trees quite long term, because obviously they're quite young and they'll need protection and stuff. And I appreciate that in doing this, I have committed, and I had to make that commitment. And it's a really beautiful commitment to have made, because now I am just so much more aware of the different kinds of trees that I walk past, and I'm always looking at their leaves and trying to guess, like, if I know what it is, or if I've heard about it in some of the research. And even then, just touching them and getting a feel for their textures and that whole variety, it's really just made me very present, and helped bring a lot of presence into into my experience. And it's beautiful to share as well with people, just to tell them, like, hey, did you know that you can use that plant to do some stuff? And it's really cool. You can leave it overnight in vinegar or something. I don't know, just like telling them different ways to collaborate. I prefer to say collaborate with the world around them rather than use, because I think there is a symbiotic sort of relationship with it. So yeah, that's what I feel. I feel like this experience has definitely encouraged me to get like my hands dirty as well, and I really wanted to like honor that and make sure that it's not just about, I'm not scared to get in the mud. I want to be on the mud all the time.
Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah. There's a question from the audience.
Yeah, there's a question coming from the audience for Jessie. I'm not sure who the name, but they ask, hi Jessie, is the poem generated by touching the plant? I'm a little confused. Is the laptop linked physically to the plant?
Yes, it is. So there are some sensors that are linked to the plant, and those feed into the laptop. So when a touch is detected, there is a neural network, an artificial intelligence model, essentially, in simple terms, I guess, on the end, and that will generate a poem that varies the temperature. So the creativity, I suppose, of the poem is linked to the mood that is determined by the other data points. I hope that answers your question.
I think so. I would think so. I was wondering if you have a poem or two that you want to kind of read an excerpt from, if it's handy.
Yes. I have one. I'll read this one. So, let's see. The brightening starlight of the light-lit hours, when the sky was bluer than the waters clear, and the world was growing a fair Eden now, out of the wild chaos of the world's cast down. It's one of them.
So the AI-generated plant poetry. We should all have some. I had a question for Zara. You've said the third part of your project was to start to create this archive, and to me it feels like such an important part of the project, because that's when you start taking your hopes about how these recipes connect people back into the community. And I was wondering if you've any ideas of how you might continue working in this space.
Yeah, I think I would love to see that collection just growing, because I think if as it builds, I mean, it will be so kind of visually, I guess, apparent of how how much variety there is, and really kind of capturing that beauty of rice as a food. And I think that can definitely expand further into I don't know, translating into more visuals or translating into more things that, like you say, connect the community together. But I think it's also thinking about that process of how these recipes have existed through time and often have been passed down through time, and what will happen to them in the future, and like how they will even adapt into the future. I think that could be quite an interesting angle to look at as well, of how the changes have kind of gone through time and what that future will look like.
Definitely. We talked a lot about climate, and we always had this idea of the hope or fear, or it's kind of something that feels possible, but challenging at the same time all along. So there were tensions in the others' works as well. If you think of Valeria's ideas around solar punk, or Okucha's ideas. And I wanted to ask you, Jessie, because you really have continued on this kind of dark ecology trajectory, and you had many ideas. And I know there's a part of it which you really wanted to make something and build something and make it work. But you were also thinking a lot about the kind of almost subversial relationship between humans and non-humans, and where have your thoughts landed, and how do you feel this kind of thinking can spread and can be a reason to hope for, in an active sense of the word?
So I think there is a lot of hope, because societies are made of people, and if people's ways of thinking can be changed, then society's ways of thinking can be changed. And I was really inspired by different ontologies and ways of seeing the world, and this idea that nature and society, human society, are separate realms is neither universal nor true, I think. So, this dualism is pervasive in Western human society, which leads to an imbalance of power and representation. But if we can reconsider our relationships and include non-human entities in our systems and politics, and I think there's a lot of hope for positive change.
Thank you. I just want to kind of say that we are open to questions from the audience, people who are listening in. Please feel free to drop the questions in the chat, and we have 10 more minutes where we can hopefully continue this conversation. So yeah, share your questions. John, you had a question for Cherise?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the lifespan of the project and the potential lifespan of the project, because it could potentially outlive all of us. I was just wondering if you had any kind of vision for that, and how it might both move forward through time, but also if you had any kind of ideas around how you might expand it, or whether you wanted to keep it more of something personal to you.
Yeah, well, I think I made some plans to go on a few trips to go and visit the trees with people and do meditations and sort of grounding exercises in the woods and poetry, and learning to identify the trees as well, just sharing knowledge between us all, and to make those trips like quite regular, I suppose, because why not, like, bring people out into the woods and just have a little moment intentionally, as well as updating the website to feature the tree's growth. I want it to be a little bit like when you're marking on a wall as you get taller. Like you sort of see this tree just getting bigger over the years, and it's something that I'm hoping that everybody can connect to, whoever goes and visits the tree and waters the tree, and if they return again. And and to, even for like really young children as well, can grow up with the tree, and develop that sort of long-lasting tie and relationship and bond, and then hopefully protection too. You know, like when you feel like something's part of you, you can you sort of want to protect it more, and you maybe you feel for its energy and its life more as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, in all of those ways, and then also encouraging other people and taking them to plant their own trees.
Yeah.
As part of the like group trips, to continue planting trees and to let that be a bit of the theme and the challenge, and to take it as far as possible. Maybe plant a tree in every country, in every park or something. I don't know, you know, just I'm gonna keep planting trees. I think it's a good thing, and it shouldn't stop.
Brilliant. Yeah, no, I look forward to seeing how it progresses. And it's kind of interesting to think about with the research that Jessie was doing, you know, kind of, I wonder how these kind of intentional trips and the meditating under the trees, and, you know, the influence that will have on the tree's growth is also something interesting to ponder.
Yeah,
so, no, I look forward to seeing it progress. Thanks.
Thank you. Me too.
I wanted to talk a little bit about this time that was actually when we were starting off the project. We were hoping that we would not be in a lockdown again, but we were, and the whole project was done online, and we were all of you were living through quite challenging times whilst thinking about hopeful futures. And I don't know, any one of you want to respond to how it's been, your journey and your process in this project while being confronted with lockdowns and your own lives coming to a halt in many different ways, emotionally and physically, and, you know, mentally taking its toll on you. What are the tensions been in trying to think about this kind of idea of an active hope?
Well, I would say I was really happy that eventually this project got me out of the house, and was a great excuse to go back into nature. And they were spaces that kind of promoted health, and it encouraged me to learn about things that could improve my immunity and take me to spaces that could do that as well, and build a bit more protection, not just over the plants and trees, but over our communities who don't always have access to expensive medicines. And maybe if they had a bit of knowledge about what resources we had just even growing on the street, we would probably, hopefully, be in a little bit better of a situation with responding to pandemics, I suppose.
I think I'd agree. So I feel that during lockdown, being forced to live at a lot slower pace compared to outside of lockdown, I noticed nature a lot more. So, you know, while I was sitting at my desk working, I could hear the birds chirping outside. And I think a lot of the ideas I had were related to this increased feeling of connection with nature, the time that I was spending out in the nature reserves, I think had an impact on the way that I was thinking. So despite all of the horrible things that lockdown brought with it, there were also some real silver linings, I suppose.
Yeah, I think going off the back of what Jessie said of like slowing down, I think whenever we've spoken about the hope for the future, I've always kind of come back to mine as being like slowing down, and I think the lockdowns really have helped to realise that. But in some ways it was really nice to think about the future as well, because it didn't feel like much was happening in the present, and to think like a hopeful future when it's been so difficult in the present was quite a nice process, I think.
Yeah, no, definitely for us to have these conversations has been really inspiring. And we went off on so many different explorations. Are there any favorite things that you learned or that you hold on with you as we wrap up this conversation? Last thoughts. Would love to hear.
So
I think one of
carry on, Zara.
I think one of my favourite kind of parts of this project specifically was kind of coming together with everyone regularly and like seeing where everyone was going with how big that project can be. Like it was just amazing to see how like each project was so different and how it was growing so much, and it was almost pushing ourselves as well to go that one step further as well. And it was a way I hadn't worked before, and it really kind of was helpful to kind of push us in the best ways, I think.
Great. Thanks, Zara.
Jessie, maybe?
I think Jessie, are you?
So I think for me, as I was delving into the topic and conducting research, a lot of my thinking changed as I learnt new things and how other people thought. So one of the key things that really stood out to me was this idea of personhood and what defines a person. So, I mentioned earlier animism, and it's one of the many different ontologies and ways of seeing the world that are out there. And in animism, there's this belief that the world is full of persons, only some of whom are human, and that life is always lived in relationship to others. And that's, I think, Graham Harvey's definition. So where animism maintains a larger than human definition, the defining features of personhood differ widely across cultures and contexts and throughout history. And we forget that even human beings sometimes are not always considered persons. Throughout history, the status of women and children and slaves has been in question. And in some cultures, personhood is something that is achieved over time through the enactment of social relationships. So, if it's intelligence that defines a person, then intelligence is perhaps not even unique to humans. If it's the ability to acquire and apply knowledge and skills, then research has shown that plants like the Mimosa pudica plant can learn to differentiate between real and apparent threats and retain this information in their memory. And if it's social relations, then plants also communicate. They have a rich social network, and they communicate with each other through mycorrhizae, so fungal networks, in reciprocal interactions. They share resources and also warnings about potential dangers. And if you think about things like these, insights have been enabled by scientific inquiry through technology. And for me, at least, it's led to a greater understanding and appreciation for the life forms that we coexist with. And if we think about it like this, maybe animism's classification of non-human beings as persons isn't so radical at all. And through understanding and empathy, we can form respect and the desire to conserve and protect.
And I guess I'd also like to hold on to the knowledge that everybody sort of shared in their explorations. There's been a huge learning and growth as well, and this ability to empower and put energy and support into each other's visions as well. I think that's been a really beautiful part of this process, and to see all of those things turn from that seed into the trees that we've got now. So yeah, I'm just excited for the future collaborations and developments of all of our projects and ideas and thoughts. Yeah, essentially.
Wow, that's the perfect way to end. Thank you all for your wonderful reflections and also just kind of insights on your projects and your thinking. For everyone who's watching, you can check out all the projects at hopeintheheat.somersethouse.org.uk. I also want to extend thanks to Valeria, Francesca, and Okacha, who are not here with us, to Somerset House for being brilliant partners, to the National Lottery Community Fund for supporting this work. Thank you so much, and hope you have a good evening. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you, everyone.